When I was a junior in college, I moved into a frat house, which means I really didn't have a meal plan. I had to cook for myself. Yes, I burned water. I wasn't very good. But every day, morning class let out, I'd go back to the apartment. And while I was eating lunch, two things were on every day between 11:30 and 12:30. One was the Roadrunner, which became a staple. And there was the Gong Show. Chuck Barris, that wild and crazy guy, came up with this idea to bring the absolute worst talent in America to a stage in an organized fashion and have three really horrible actors, comedians, who no one had ever heard of, who got famous because they were really horrible actors who were on the Gong Show. And these people would get up and perform. Most of them were horrible. I mean, horrible so bad that one comedian got gonged before he said a word because the person on the panel didn't like how he looked. Okay? As creatives, and most of our church are creatives, rejection is something that we learn to live with, and tolerate, and put up with. Writers and musicians and actors are coached on a regular basis to deal with the multifaceted world of rejection. Blogger Nathan Tower even goes as far as categorizing rejection, his rejection letters in his post, and he describes it as 10 levels of rejection and what to do about it. There even used to be a magazine called Rejection Quarterly, which accepted only short stories that have been rejected at least 5 times. The writers submitted the 5 rejection letters as proof, along with their stories. Sadly, like many other magazines, Rejection Quarterly stopped publishing due to the fact that they were rejected by the average public who didn't want to pay for a magazine about rejected writers. As painful as a creative it is to be rejected professionally, it's dwarfed by the level of pain we go through when someone we know rejects us. Family, friends, co-workers. A few off-color words from a key person in our lives can just create turmoil and havoc and cause us to be despondent, be hard on ourselves, messes with our self-image. I think it breeds insecurity, inferiority, perfectionism, compulsive drivenness. Fortunately, and this is what I want to get at today, fortunately, God counters this toxic thinking with the only thing that I really believe that can defeat it is acceptance. If you understand your identity in Christ, of who God has called you to be, of who God says you are, it doesn't eliminate the sting of rejection, but it brings it into proper balance, where you have and are driven by this inner confidence that God gives you. Growing up, just put this out since we have a small crowd today. Growing up, who showed you acceptance? Was there a a teacher, a friend, somebody who you knew. Anybody? Who?
Very great teacher.
Yeah, she still asks about you. Yeah. It's true. It's true. Anybody else?
Grandma.
Grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a couple music teachers that were just, they took me in like I was their lost puppy, you know? Where they looked at me, they talked to me, they invested in me, they spoke into my life, you know? Let me tell you, the world can be cruel, can't it? I'll tell you something, first grade, there were 4 little girls in first grade who didn't like me. And they were the 4 little girls who were, you know, they skipped and they hopped and they held hands and they sang. And they were these happy little kids. They controlled the class. And if they didn't like you, you were toast. You know, there was, the Flintstones was a brand new show on TV, you know, in color, it was primetime cartoons. And they had Dino, the dinosaur, the purple dinosaur. And they made up songs about people, and they made up a song about me, Fatso the purple dinosaur. And they would hop, they would hop and skip, and they would jump down the lane, you know, holding hands, singing, "Oh, there's Charlie, Fatso the purple dinosaur," and they would sing little verses about how chubby I was, and a fat little kid that I was, and I hated them. I wanted them all. I wanted the ground to open up. You know, my buddy Richie and I would hang out. Jeff and Richie and I, we would stand. We were in one of those windy areas where the cold would just cut down. You know, kids don't have recess like we had recess. Recess in those days, you went into the elements. You had no choice. It is now 9:27. You go outside. You know, and we would huddle in these little corners of nooks around the building where we would stand to break the wind. You know, these little girls would run by us and sing horrible songs about us. I remember that because my buddy Richie passed away this weekend. You know, it's just something that happens as you get old. You lose friends. You know. But the world's hard. The world is cruel. You know? People judge you. And that judgment leads to rejection. So what do we do with it? Well, we're going to look at, as we have with the life of David, we're going to look at it today through David's eyes, David's experience. And if you would, turn to 1 Samuel. And I won't keep you long. 1 Samuel. '17. And we're going to look at verse 32 through 37. Okay. Now, David, precocious as he has brought food, left food with the quartermaster, gone off to the front to see what's going on. You know, we looked at comfort last week and how people were hiding in their tents. And David makes his proclamation, and the first thing they do is drag him before the king. Because the deal is, with Goliath, is you send your best man out. If I kill him, you all lose. So David says the Psalm, verse 32, "Let no man's courage fail because of him, Goliath. Your servant would go out and fight with this Philistine." Mind you, he is 15 years old, ruddy, which means he's a little redhead. Okay? Probably a little pockmarked face, you know, this little itty bitty guy, and he's saying, "I'm going." And then Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight him, for you're only a young man," or as some verses say, a small boy, "and he is a warrior since his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant was tending his father's sheep when a lion or a bear came to take a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after it. I attacked it and rescued the lamb from its mouth. And when it rose up against me, I seized it by its whiskers, and I struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted and defiled the armies of God. And David said, the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, he will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. And then Saul tried to dress him in his battle attire. And you can imagine this little kid with a little floppy little helmet on that is too big for him and the stuff like that. And David says, listen, I got this. God's got this, you know? And the thing that we have to see from this is how did Saul react when David offered to fight the giant? What did he do? He scoffed at him. Because you're just a kid. How many times in your life you have volunteered to do something? You've been called, you know in your heart God has called you to do something, and you stepped forward and you said, I want to do this. And someone said, you're just a kid, go away when you become a man. Or go away and become a woman. Xena, Prince of Glory, you know? Think about that. How many times have you been put down? I have been put down in some of the most amazingly creative ways. You're too young to do that. I've heard. You're too old to do that. You can't do that, you're a senior pastor. You can't do that because you're fat. You can't do that because you're out of shape. You can't do that because you didn't go to that seminary. You can't, I have heard so many people on so many arguments. I just want to spit and say, oh yeah? David was scoffed at. When I was in high school, I went out for districts. Districts was a badge of honor. As a student musician, as a band geek, it's the equivalent of going all pro, you know? And every year we had a few people in my school who were just scary, incredibly good. Well, I determined I was going to audition, and I went. I made it. I was one of 3 that year from the high school. I remember sitting in the lobby of the high school administration building, and a bunch of other band geeks are all standing around, you know, the people that are the really good band geeks, you know, and they're saying, who made it this year? The normal characters, you know. Of course, they said, Billy Kiefer made it. And they're like, really? Well, they lower their standards. How'd you get in? Who'd you pay? Yeah, I mean, I was amazed at the put-downs and the rejection I got. And then something happened, and I didn't know this, but again, I had a champion in my band director who was Howard, he was a godly man. He spoke into my life, he defended me when even I wasn't worth defending. He was like a dad to me. He posted back in the days when bulletin boards mattered, that's where you got your news in school, you know. But not only did I make it, but I led the entire district in sight reading. Not just my instrument, but all instruments. All 1,672 children who applied and auditioned, I beat in sight reading. People are harsh. They're unloving. They will put you down when you attempt to do stuff. You know, Saul looked at David and said, "You're fish bait." You know? People are going to judge you without knowing you. And that's the first 2 things that we have to see from this. People are going to judge you without knowing you. They're going to sum you up and say you don't have what it takes. Even if you know that God has called you, you're going to get rejection. And by the way, in God's kingdom, in Christianity, you're going to have more people who are Christians be hard on you and reject you than lost people. Don't ask me why, it's just how it is. I don't like it, I'd like to change it. But the simple matter of the fact is that there are going to be people who put you down and judge you. There are going to be people who are going to react negatively when you want to attempt something. Thing is, and this is the turning point that I want us to see today. How did David respond to the words of rejection? By the way, Saul let him go. You know? Even though Saul had his doubts, David went. David knew he could. Do you hear that? As a young musician, I studied with a guy named Ralph Cotero. Ralph Cotero was a trumpeter. If you watch the old Betty Goodman movie, with Lionel Hampton and all those guys, and Steve, I think it was Steve, not Steve Martin. Can't remember his name, tall good-looking guy, glasses. Anyway, in that movie, in the band, there's my teacher. He toured with some of the major jazz greats. And this guy, you know, he taught me, it's hard to do this, but you know, he taught me to feel the rhythm. He said, when you look at a piece of music, you feel the rhythm. You know, you do the beat on your chest. And he said, before you ever play it, you put the beat on your chest and you're looking at the song and you're thinking it through in your mind and you're thinking how the chord goes and the rhythm and all that. And you just, he said, then you start singing in the back of your mind. You know, and you're feeling the beat, you're feeling the rhythm, and you're feeling the song. He said, then you put the horn to your lips and play. He said, you rehearse it through your mind before you ever start to play it. That is the greatest theological statement I can ever make to a congregation. Because you see, as God has called you, if you know that God has spoken and said, son, daughter, I have called you, you're my own, and you need to do this, you have to look at the circumstances in front of you, and you have to believe. You have to look at it and say, hey, if God has called me, let me look at it, let me feel the rhythm. Let me feel that beat. Let me rehearse that song and sing it in the back of my mind. Then let me put my hands to it. You know? That's what David did. That's what it will take you to accomplish anything great in the kingdom of God. Listen, you want to be a great parent? You got to feel the rhythm. You got to feel the beat. You got to rehearse that song in your mind. Let the Spirit of God speak to you about what He is showing you, and then do it and perform it, do it. David rehearsed with sound how God had worked in the past. David had confidence. Listen, your confidence is not going to come from what you think you could do. Your confidence is going to come from what you know God has already done. And because you have already known that God has conquered death and the grave, this rejection. I'm meeting with my surgeon in a week. He's away. I'm meeting when he comes back. And we're going to plan my surgery. And I don't know. I don't know. What you don't know is what you don't know. I know my MRI grew a little bit, you know? Okay, so it grew a little bit. Big honking deal. The verse that I got was, God's got this. Believe. I believe God's not done with me yet. I believe, as my oncologist believes, this is a wonderful opportunity at a crossroad. Do you want to one day dance at your daughter's wedding? Yes, when you have to lose weight. I said, this is a little bit serious way about going about weight loss. She goes, I know, but we all know that God works in His incredibly mysterious ways. And sometimes He's got to give you cancer to get your stinking attention because you're such a butthead. You know? Listen to me. You've got to believe that he is able to do it above and beyond all that you ask and think. You got to believe the fact that he has called you with a purpose and a plan. Jeremiah 29. If he has called you with a plan and a purpose, he is not done with you yet. And if he is not done with you yet, the fact is you're going to face rejection where people are going to be mean and cruel and spit on you and reject you, not for any other reason, but the fact is you love Jesus. I have actually had someone say, I don't have a problem with what you want to do. I have a problem with the fact of who you want to do it for. Politician. They're no longer among us. I'm still here. Listen. It's often hard to shake off the comments that's said about us or not said about us. The feeling that if we don't live up to other people's expectations, we can lead to this giant rejection. And we'll end up having this long-term relationship with it. We were never worthy of this on our own, but we are worth enough for God to send His Son to die for our sins. If we live for other people's approval, we will never feel as if we measured up ever. But if we live from God's approval, we already know that we are accepted. And that mindset changes, it's a game changer. It's game over. If you function as if you know God believes in you, if you function, have you ever thought about the fact that God believes in you? Think about that for a minute. That's where I'm going to leave this off today. Think about that. Do you believe in God? Well, God believes in you. He went to the cross for you. Whether you knew it or not at the time, He went because of you. Who killed Jesus? I did. Whose sin killed Jesus? Mine. Did I know that when I was born? Did I know that when I stole candy from boys 5 and 10 when I was 5 years old? As I'm standing in line with the rocks candy in my little chubby cheek, and Mom going, "Where did you get that candy?" You know, I mean, listen. When I dropped the F-bomb on my mom for the very first time, I did a lot of bad. You have preschoolers, you know. I'm just warning you what you're going to be faced with. My dad took me down to the dock to pick up Thanksgiving turkey. He's Union. And I picked up a few other colorful languages while I was waiting on the dock for my dad to come out with the turkey. And I've always been a word warrior, and I try new words out on my mommy all the time. And we're sitting on the front seat of the car, and she's backing out of the driveway to go out on 322. And I'm sitting beside my mommy. This is long before seatbelts. You know, seatbelts in those days was, you know, Mom's putting her arm across you. You know, so I'm 5 years old. I'm sitting on the front seat. I'm bouncing. I'm going F, 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 F. And as my mom is backing out of the driveway, she slams on the brakes, and I go forward. And next thing I know, you what? And boom. And next thing I know, she is peeling my right cheek off the window that was 3 feet away from me, dragging me in the house, and my first taste of my first experience of Ivory soap. Even then, God believed in me. Even then, all my successes, all my failures, all my screw-ups, all my sin, the time I did drugs, the multiple times I did drugs, the multiple times I got blind drunk when I was 12. You know, all the things that I did wrong, God still believed in me. He believed in me enough to come and die for me. He believed in me enough to have a plan for my life. Who am I to doubt anything when I face rejection? It's God. Why don't you? Father, this morning, speak to our hearts. Have your way with us. If anyone's struggling with doubt and rejection today, Father, they're all intertied. Fear, doubt, rejection. These are giants. And we need to slay these things. And we need to slay these things with good theology. We need to slay these things by feeling the rhythm understanding the beat, understanding the song that you put in our hearts, that we are prepared to understand our relationship with you, and because you have accepted us, that you have loved us, that you have set us free, we can thrive. Bless them. Move upon our hearts this morning and change us. Help us to draw closer to you and become the people that you have desired us to be. Bless them in your Son's name. Amen.